You know, it feels like you can't go a single day without seeing a headline about some massive data breach or a crippling cyber attack. So, what is really going on behind those headlines? And maybe more importantly, how do we even begin to fight back? Well, let's break it all down and build ourselves a digital battle plan. Now, to help us navigate this, we're going to be leaning on the fantastic book Cybercrime and Cybersecurity by Paul A. Waters. It gives us a really solid framework for understanding this incredibly complex digital battleground. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute foundation of all security, the CIA triad. Then we'll dive into the kind of modern threats we're all facing and who's behind them. After that, we'll shift gears into strategy, how to manage risk, what a real battle plan looks like, and finally, why this is a war that, well, it never really ends. All right, first up, let's talk about the concept that underpins pretty much everything else in cybersecurity. The entire goal, the whole point of cybersecurity, can be boiled down to these three core principles. It's called the CIA triad. And no, not that CIA. But honestly, it's just as important in the digital world. It stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So what do these actually mean? Well, it's surprisingly simple. Confidentiality is all about privacy, keeping secrets secret. Integrity means making sure your data is accurate and nobody's messed with it. And availability just means that your stuff is there when you actually need to use it. If you lose even one of these, your security has failed. It's that simple. Okay, so now that we know what we're trying to protect, let's take a look at the threats we're actually up against. And believe me, the digital onslaught is relentless. It's everything from those sneaky phishing emails trying to trick you into giving up your password, to absolutely devastating ransomware that can shut down entire hospitals. Then you've got malware, threats from inside a company, massive attacks designed to knock websites offline, and honestly, that's just scratching the surface. And here's something that's really crucial to understand. Threats don't just come from some shadowy hacker in a dark room. Sometimes the call is coming from inside the house. An insider threat, a disgruntled employee or a careless contractor, can be just as damaging, if not more so. Their reasons might be different, maybe sabotage instead of financial gain, but the result, it can be the exact same catastrophic breach. So who are these people? Who's actually sitting behind the keyboard, launching these attacks? Well, we can pretty much group them into three big buckets. First, you've got your classic cybercrime. These folks are in it for one reason, to make money. Then you have cyberterrorism, or hacktivism. This is more about making a political statement, causing embarrassment, or pushing an agenda. And finally, the big one, cyber warfare. This is where nations use cyber attacks as a weapon against other nations' critical infrastructure. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. The whole idea of the lone hacker in their parents' basement, that stereotype is long dead. The game has changed completely. Now we're dealing with highly organized, well-funded, and sometimes state-sponsored groups of incredibly sophisticated attackers. So with all these serious threats out there, how in the world do you even begin to defend yourself? Well, the answer isn't just building higher walls. It's about thinking strategically about risk. And it all comes down to this one simple but incredibly powerful equation. Risk equals the likelihood of something bad happening times the severity of the damage if it does. This little formula is the bedrock of pretty much every security decision. And that equation isn't just theory, right? It translates directly into a practical tool, like this risk assessment chart. You can literally map the likelihood of an attack against how severe it would be. This helps organizations see what's a low risk they can maybe live with versus a high risk they have to tackle right now. It's all about prioritizing where you put your resources. But here's the catch. Assessing risk isn't just about one system or one computer. You have to think across all kinds of different scales. I mean, a brand new zero-day attack that hits one person's laptop is one level of problem. A slow, grinding, long-term espionage campaign against an entire country is another thing entirely. A good risk analysis looks at everything, from the micro to the macro. So, how do we take all this strategic thinking about risk and turn it into an actual functional battle plan for a company or an organization? The absolute best way to think about it is with the defense in depth analogy. Picture a shopping mall. It has guards at the main doors. That's your perimeter security. But each individual store still puts those little electronic tags on their clothes. Why? Because you need layers. No single defense is ever perfect. So you build a fortress with multiple overlapping layers of security. And a really solid strategy, a real digital fortress, rests on a few key pillars. It starts with policy. That's the rule book that guides everything. Then you need clear roles and responsibilities so everyone knows their job. That's all guided by a management structure, and it has to be baked in from the very beginning with good planning. Then you need assurance, which is basically just checking to make sure your security is actually working. And finally, accreditation. That's when leadership looks at the risk that's left over and formally says, okay, we can live with this.
And this is so, so important. Security can't just be some afterthought you bolt on at the end. It has to be woven into every single step of a system's life. Right from the beginning, when you're figuring out what you need, through the decision to buy or build something, during implementation and testing, into its daily operation, and all the way to the very end when you decommission it. At every single stage, you have to be asking, what are the security implications here?
All of this brings us to one final and frankly crucial point about the digital world we're all living in. Our source material just says it perfectly. The nature of the threat is forever changing. The moment you patch a vulnerability or close a loophole, the attackers are already looking for the next one. This is a constant game of cat and mouse. And there is no magic fix. There is no such thing as a silver bullet. So if you take anything away from this, let it be these key points. First, cybersecurity is an ongoing process, not a product you can just buy. Second, a real defense is always a combination of people, process, and technology. Third, the goal is not to eliminate risk, because that's impossible. It's to manage it intelligently. And finally, being proactive is always, always better than scrambling to react after you've already been hit. Which really just leaves us all with one final question to think about. In this world of constantly evolving threats, is your digital fortress, both personal and professional, built on solid rock, or is it built on sand?